What's up guys, Matt Day here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Leica M3. Now you guys know I love the Leica M series cameras. I've had my M6 for a few years now and I've used it for pretty much everything. For me it's just been a really good everyday camera for just daily documentary stuff. It's been a camera I've really enjoyed using for that specific thing. And a lot of people over the years have told me, you know, if you like your M6 so much, you should try out the M3. And a lot of you guys have asked me to do a review of the camera if I can, just because it is such an iconic camera. It's the very first M camera that Leica ever made. And I've always wanted to try one. I've just never really had the opportunity to. But I was actually sent this from my good friend Kyle Myles, and we did a temporary camera swap. So I sent him my Hasselblad 500cm, and he sent me his Leica M3. That way I could shoot it for a week and put together a review for you guys. So big thanks to Kyle Myles for doing that. If you guys want to follow him on Instagram, and I'll put a link in the description. Really good photographer, good dude. Be sure to check him out. He does amazing portrait work, especially black and whites if you're into that. So yeah, I've been shooting this for the last week, and you know, I will say that before people would always tell me, you know, I'm sure you love your M6, but you have to try an M3. It's just so much smoother, and the viewfinder is so much better, and blah, 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 blah. It just feels great. And I always just, you know, kind of brush that off. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. This seems to be a camera that a lot of Leica purists really, you know, swear by. And, you know, sometimes the Leica fan base can kind of drive me nuts. I love my M6, but, you know, people take it very, very serious and act like it's, you know, way better than any other camera out there. And it's just about what the right tool is for you. But I can harp on that all day. But anyway, people always talk about how great the M3 felt and how superior it was, and I just never bought into it. And after shooting this, you know, for the last week, I can say that they're totally right. This thing is insanely nice to use. Everything about it feels better than my M6. The weight of the camera, it's made of brass, which I always just, you know, laughed it off whenever people talked about that, but it really does feel so smooth. It feels great in the hands. Everything about it's so smooth. The viewfinder itself is so bright and clear, and especially using a 50mm where you have a little bit more magnification on this viewfinder versus my M6. It just makes shooting with the 50 that much more enjoyable. And the viewfinder patch in there, the rangefinder patch, you know, with the M6, people, you know, have probably mentioned, or you've probably heard about having a viewfinder flare or rangefinder flare, whatever you want to call it. Basically, whenever you're shooting a certain kind of light, the way the light is hitting your rangefinder patch there, it can kind of flare up and gets really kind of hard to focus. And it's something that I've experienced plenty of times over the years, and it was just something I'd never really complained about because, you know, the M6 is a camera I had always wanted for years, and then I finally was able to buy one, and to complain about anything about it, I just felt like that's kind of lame to do. But I will say now, after shooting with this camera and this viewfinder, I'm probably going to be noticing that flare and, you know, the difficulty in focusing a lot more just because this thing is so smooth. But again, not a big deal, but I'm really, really not looking forward to sending this back to Kyle because this thing has been so much fun to shoot. As far as, you know, features of the camera, there's not a lot to it, just like any Leica M camera. You know, it's really, really basic. It's just a typical rangefinder. You have your shutter speed dial on top, your film advance, your frame counter, you have your film rewind here. On the front of the camera, you obviously have your viewfinder, your rangefinder set up here. You have your frame line selector on the side, which will move whenever you, you know, attach a different focal length lens on there. You also have just the button to release the lens, and you have your rewind tab that you just flip that over before you rewind it just to unlock the spool, and you have a self timer. Back of the camera, you have a couple different ports for flashes, your viewfinder window there, you have a cold shoe attachment up top, and then on the back here you have where you just set your film speed. Just as a reminder, there is no meter in here, so that's not going to control anything inside the camera. It's just going to be a reminder so you know what kind of film speed you have in there. And on the bottom you have, you know, basically your little tab here to open up the bottom and load your film in, and then over here you have a tripod socket. That's it. That's pretty much everything on the entire camera. There's not a lot to it, just like any M camera. They're really stripped down, and that's what I love about the cameras. I love how simple they are. And for this camera, for this week that I've been shooting, I rented this lens from Lens Rentals. It's the 50mm Zeiss f1.5 sonar, And it's been a nice lens to use. I actually haven't seen any of my film scans yet. I haven't sent it out yet. I'm kind of doing this review all out of order, so I'm gonna have to send this camera back to Kyle tomorrow, ship my film out later this week, and then put the film scans in the video, and then publish it, edit it, and everything. So I'm doing this all kind of out of order, but obviously, you know, we'll find out how this lens is. I have never shot it before, but it's been nice to use. I've always been a fan of Zeiss glass. I've heard some things about having focus shift issues on this lens whenever you're shooting it wide open, but we'll see if that's, you know, the case or not. It may just be on certain copies of the lens, or it might be for all of them. I'm not really sure. But that's pretty much it for the camera. It's really, really simple. To load the film, I thought it would be something that I wouldn't really enjoy just because I'm so used to loading my M6. It has basically like their quick load system, and you just kind of drop the film in and it's ready to go. Whereas this one, you have a take-up spool, and it always just looked like I'd be kind of fumbling with it. But it's really not that bad. So we're going to go ahead and load up the film. That way you guys can see how it all works. So loading the M3 is pretty simple. I currently don't have any film in the camera right now, but if I did, I would have to rewind the film first. And the first thing you want to do is basically just flip over this little tab and then lift up over here on the side. And this is a knob that you're going to sit here and turn, and that's going to actually rewind your film back into the canister that you're shooting. And once you're done with that, you just push this down and you're ready to go. That's something that does take a lot of time compared to my M6. My M6 has a little lever that you can do it a lot faster, and that's one thing I don't like about the camera, but not a big deal. People have been using this camera for years and doing just fine with that. So to open up the bottom here, you basically just pull up this little tab, twist it, and then the bottom plate pops off just like any Leica M camera. If you're used to shooting these cameras, you're already used to this and it's not a big deal. But if you're used to shooting just a typical, like an SLR or even a Voigtlander rangefinder where the back kind of swings open like this, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's really not that bad once you try it a few times. So on the bottom here, you basically have this little diagram that kind of shows you how to load the film and where the film goes, and you have this little take-up spool right here. And whenever you pull this take-up spool out to load your film, it's going to reset your frame counter up here on top of the camera. So that way, every time you put in a new roll, it's already set to 0 and you're ready to go. So that's a really nice feature of it as well. On the M2, you have to manually adjust it after each roll. So we're going to go ahead and take the take-up spool out now, and I'm going to set the M3 down, and I'm going to go ahead and grab my film of choice, which is Ilford HP5. You guys know that. And the way to load it is pretty simple. On the camera, or on the take-up spool here, you have kind of this little tab, and it's kind of hard to show in video, but there's this little tab right here that you're going to basically slide your film leader in, so that way it's locked in there really, really tight. So to do that, all you have to do is just slide it underneath here. Let me try and show it. It's kind of hard to do all this while I'm watching a monitor and trying to show you guys. It's a lot quicker to do it when you're not trying to, instruct. But basically, that's all you have to do. The film is inserted in there, and you have these little dots that kind of make an arrow. So whenever you slide the film underneath, it pops up, or it shows up, and that just lets you know that your film is all the way back and it's locked in, ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and basically pull out some slack on the film, so that way we can drop it into the camera. So grab the M3 here, and again on the bottom, if you're not used to loading these cameras, you can kind of rely on the diagram. Film's going to go on this side, take-up spool on this side here. But we're just going to kind of drop this in, and just like that, push down on the take-up spool, and we're locked in. It's really that simple. If you want to take the film advance lever and just kind of advance it, make sure your film is lining up with these sprocket holes right here, and make sure it is catching, which it is. So we're good to go. Kind of close this little back right here, and on the side here, you can see this little, basically like this little knob, or tab, I guess, where this is going to lock up. So you just slide that over here, push this all the way down, twist it, and now we're ready to shoot. So the first thing you want to do is advance it a couple of times, shoot a couple frames, and if you watch these two dots right here to make sure they're spinning, you can see they're spinning right there, and that just lets you know the film is advancing, so you're not going to be sitting here exposing nothing if your film isn't caught. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Really, really simple. That's how you load the Leica M3. Alright, we loaded up some film, we're ready to go. So recently I took the camera out and basically just put the GoPro up on top of the camera, walked around town, shot some photos whenever I was on a walk with Molly and Nora, and just tried to come up with some photos. So we'll go ahead and take a look at those now. right, so I hope you guys enjoyed those photos from our walk, and also just the photos that I made while I've had this camera for the last week or so. And just to kind of wrap things up, again, this thing has been a joy to use. A lot of you have asked about comparing it to my M6, and everything about this camera feels a lot smoother. The film advance, the shutter release, everything about it just feels great, and it feels a lot better when you're shooting it versus the M6. Even the viewfinder is great. I love the viewfinder on this camera. But if I had both cameras in front of me and I had to choose one, I would still choose the M6, and that's just because it has the meter inside the camera. You know, if you're shooting the same film stock over and over, you can probably guess your exposures, you know, at least to be in the ballpark to where it's going to be usable. And there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, whenever I'm taking this camera with me everywhere I go, all day long, in and out of buildings, indoor lighting, outdoor lighting, the light's always changing. Being able to have a meter to where I don't have to either pull out a handheld meter or try and guess the exposure and try and think about it, I can just basically rely on the meter, because my M6 meter is extremely accurate. I can basically just, you know, trust that meter. It's reassuring, and I know I'm going to have the right exposure. And to me, being able to shoot quicker like that, that's a big deal, because this is a camera I'm taking with me everywhere, and I'm using it for quick documentary style stuff of my daily life with my family. So that's the only reason I would choose the M6 over the M3, just for my own personal use. Everybody's different, so you guys are going to have different opinions on that. But for me, I would still choose the M6 just because it fits me better. But that's pretty much it for the M3. Again, huge thanks to Kyle Myles for sending this to me. Kyle, I hope you enjoyed the Hasselblad that you've had for the last week or so and taken care of it. And, you know, I really appreciate it. I hope you guys appreciate it as well, because a lot of people have asked me for a video on the M3, and it's one I've wanted to do for a long time. I just haven't really had the opportunity to do so. So if you guys have any questions for me at all, please leave those below in the comments, and I'll try to answer anything that I can. And if you like what you saw and you're interested in this channel, be sure to subscribe. And that's it for today. So I want to thank you guys again, as always, for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.